So in this lesson, we're going to be moving on to the refining stage on the hair. And we're going to be using a new skill in this lesson, and that is installing custom brushes. Hair can be a particularly difficult thing to paint, but we're going to make the process a lot easier by using special brushes specifically designed to paint hair. So first we're going to get our workspace set up. We've already put all of the face layers into a separate group, so they're sort of out of the way. We're going to create a new layer on top of the hair highlights. And we're not going to make this a clipping mask because we actually want to go outside the edges of the hair here. We're going to call that hair texture. And now we're ready to look at loading brushes. Now before you can do this step, you must have downloaded the brushes that I gave you the link to. So go to the brush selection window, click the top right icon, and go down to Load Brushes. Then you're going to go to wherever you saved the hair brushes that I gave you the link to. That's going to show you 3 different brushes. Now these are brushes that I just made myself. There are lots of different brushes that you can download on the internet if you go looking for hair brushes. They are a very common Photoshop tool. And when you paint with these brushes, they automatically give you a texture that looks like hair. So this is going to save us an awful lot of time. Hair is one thing that is especially difficult if you're using a mouse. So I really recommend a tablet for this stage. Make sure that your tablet settings have only opacity clicked this time. We don't want size to be controlled by the pen pressure. You want to make sure that the transfer option is checked and that opacity is set to respond to pen pressure. And that's pretty much it for setting up. I would recommend you actually try out the hair brushes on a separate file just to get a feel for how they work. So now we're going to start painting on the actual hair itself. So make sure you're on your hair texture layer. And the key here is to overlap multiple times to create this sense of an overlapping texture. You want your opacity to be a little bit higher than normal, somewhere around 50 or 60%. But the low opacity means that as you lift your brush up at the end of the stroke, it will look like the ends kind of taper off. I'll be speeding up portions of this tutorial, but you should know that this took about 17 or 18 minutes to do, so it should be much faster than painting the face. It's really important in this step to follow the direction of the hair as you paint. You're going to see the lines, and you want the lines to be going in the correct direction, so you have to flow with the hair. And it's perfectly okay to go outside the lines. In fact, you want to at this point because you want the edges of the hair to be textured. Remember that the face is on a higher layer than the hair, so we can paint into the face as much as we want and it won't overlap anything. I find it helpful to paint in the darks first and then to sample some light areas and paint over top. It does involve a lot of going back and forth over the same area. You should resize the brush every so often just to keep the strokes from being all exactly the same size. So once the bigger areas of value and texture are blocked in, I'm going to switch to the smaller 3-dot brush to do some more fine details. One tip, anytime you're really happy with the way things look, make a new layer and start adding any further details onto that layer, because then if you mess something up, you can always just remove that layer and go back to the layer that you liked. There's no rule that says all of this has to be on one layer. Keep looking at your reference picture and try to break the hair into shapes, into areas of light and dark. Don't get caught up trying to draw every single individual strand. That's why we're using this kind of brush, so we don't have to do that. Hair is definitely one of those places where you don't have to worry about sticking exactly to your reference picture. As long as it looks generally hair-like, people aren't going to pay that much attention to it. This is definitely not the place to be a perfectionist, or you'll be at this for days. Okay, so this is more than good enough for texture. There's two other places we still need to do something. One is to hide some of the rounded brush edges that you can still see from our original base value. So select your base value layer, go to the eraser tool and pick one of the hair brushes for the eraser. And then shrink it down, and we're going to just sort of erase the edges where it's really round there, just so that it's broken up and sharp and looks like hair instead of a solid mass. It's okay to have your opacity set to 100% for this. So the second thing we need to do is add a little bit of hair that goes in front of the face. And in order to do that, we've got to make a new layer on top of the face group. And on this new layer, we're going to paint any hair that comes in front of the face, including the neck. So the edge of the hair here comes a little bit over the neck, so we're going to paint that in. And then we're also going to do the same thing on the forehead so that the hair looks like it's growing out of the forehead and you don't have that obvious sharp edge. All right, and with that, we are almost done the grayscale image. We're just going to take a quick moment to fill in the shoulders. Now the shoulders are very unimportant. No one's going to pay any attention to them other than the basic outline of them. So we're not going to worry about doing this in any detail at all. Put them in a layer that's below the hair so that the hair shows over top, and we'll just paint in a dark value for the shape of them and leave the center a little bit lighter where the white shirt is. One other thing I almost forgot was the ear. We'll put that on a separate layer above the hair details but below the face, and we'll just paint that in according to the reference picture, again without paying too much attention to it because no one else is going to. Alright, and after this point you can save your work, save it as a different file name from the file before.